It doesn't matter if you have the right answer. The only way that you make this successful is if you make it everybody else's answer and everybody forgets that it was the answer came from you. Like, that is how you do change management. That is how you influence and persuade. And that is how you get a strategy to get legs underneath of it. And that's how you know you were successful. When everybody else thinks it was their idea, it's just like kind of the low ego thing that you have to get comfortable with, right? But it's so true. And if I think back on my transformation experiences that I have led, where I have messed up or where I have been successful, it's been this very low ego. How do we make it everybody else's idea? How do we bring people along at the start of the journey, even if we think we know better? Even if we think we have the answer, it's never as good an answer as when everybody comes along with it.
Real quick before we get into the interview. One of the first exercises I run with executive teams is mapping their business portfolio to visualize the current work in progress and how it aligns to the overall business strategy. Now, without exception, every time I run this exercise, the gap between the current state and desired state is far wider than every executive believed, hoped, or even imagined. I've put the exact template to use, how I do this, and made it free for all of you to download by following the link in the comments. Go get your copy and let me know how it goes. Now back to the show. Welcome to the Unlearn podcast, where we dive into the stories and insights of leaders who've embraced transformation, innovation, and rethinking the way things can be done. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome Kristie Edling-Day, a dynamic leader who spent her career at the intersection of technology, business strategy, and operations. Kristie has a remarkable journey that spans roles in world-class organizations such as Vanguard and LPL Financial, where she's currently the CIO. She's consistently driven impact at scale, whether it's leading cross-functional teams, optimizing complex systems, or fostering organizational growth. Kristie has a knack for tackling challenges head-on and finding innovative solutions. In this episode, we'll explore her insights on leadership, the pivotal moments that shaped her career, and the mindset shifts required to succeed in a rapidly changing world. Her experiences offer valuable lessons on not just unlearning outdated approaches, but embracing new paradigms that unlock potential for individual and organizations alike. Enjoying the podcast? Don't forget to subscribe and follow us on YouTube. This way, you won't miss any episode, and it greatly supports our podcast.
I did not join Vanguard thinking I wanted to be an executive in technology. It was a little bit of a job, and I honestly, when I joined Vanguard, I thought, I would be there for a few years, figure out what I really want to do, and then go do that. I definitely didn't join expecting to be there 17 years later, didn't join expecting to be a CIO, didn't really actually have much of a perspective on leadership. So my dad was a small business owner. We grew up not having a lot, and he was a self-made man. So I remember the value of hard work, but not really leadership in the sense of like going to a corporate job and having people report to you. And I remember early on being asked what I wanted to do. And for me at that time, it was just exploration. I was encouraged to take a role that was there. It wasn't a leadership job, but it was one of these, at the time it was called being a process advocate. And really, as I would describe it now, it was being an intermediary between the development community and the senior leadership, technology leadership team of the division. It was an opportunity to sort of bring process improvement ideas, to represent the voice of the developer community, to talk about ways that we could drive efficiency. And there in that role, I had my first taste of what it was like to help other people achieve their goals and to give other people a voice and to recognize others for contributing to something that there is no way I could have done on my own. And so I left that role thinking and understanding for the first time that leadership wasn't about having people report to you. It wasn't about an office. It wasn't about power. It was about helping other people achieve their goals and recognizing them and making them feel amazing, and together doing something that you could have never done on your own. So
Yeah,
that was
no.
sort of the moment where on the other side of that, I was able to answer and say, I want to be a leader. Never. And at that time, what I have said, I want to be a CIO, but it was like clarity that the leadership was part of my journey.
Yeah, I love hearing people's sort of experiences in that and what inspires them to, I guess, discover parts they didn't even know about themselves until you're sometimes in these new, uncomfortable, often opportunities, right? Like that's where a lot of growth happens. It's where you learn a lot about yourself. And as you say, obviously this is an early experience in your career, but you often don't know what you're going to enjoy until you really put yourself in those positions. And I always find that sort of fascinating where sometimes it's almost like if you can learn that early, it almost becomes a little bit of a superpower when you have these opportunities appear where you don't know how to do it, you've never done it before. You're sort of gravitating towards these things because you've had such a great experience from it. As you say, you spent 17 years in Granvard after that. So I imagine that was a pattern that just started happening for you where you could say, yeah, I'll give it a shot. That sounds interesting. What am I going to learn from this role? So what were some of the other, as you say, turning points that started to help you recognize that as an opportunity for growth?
There are a few things, but one of them is learning and growth and being challenged. And that fear that maybe I can't do it, but I have to go try. And, the next really big moment like that for me was I had a little bit of a crossroads in front of me. And it's funny, you mentioned John. John is a part of many of my formative leadership experiences. And at this particular time, there was an opportunity to either move out of IT for a while and go into a business job. It was a corporate strategy function at Vanguard. Or I could stay where I was. So that job would have required a relocation. Or I could stay where I was, which I was living in Charlotte at the time. The headquarters were outside of Philadelphia. I could stay in Charlotte and do this neat job, but it was within IT. It would have been learning more about global sourcing and global workforce and taking that role. And both were great jobs. Actually, the job in corporate strategy was a lateral move. The job, if I had stayed, was a promotion. They wanted to keep me at the time, and I really appreciated that. And I remember having to make that choice between, like, am I going to go to corporate strategy? Am I going to stay, take the promotion and take the safer path? And I knew in my gut that I needed to go take the corporate strategy job. I needed to go prove that I could be something and do something outside of the domain that by that point I had been in for almost a decade. And to your point, I had done just about every job in the SDLC life cycle. So I wanted to go do something different. I had by that point, people I admired, technology leaders that I saw what a rotation outside of tech had done for them. And it was just one of those things that opportunity didn't come along very often, and I just felt like I had to take it. And it's so funny sometimes, I look back at decisions that I made. I'm like, man, that was actually pretty gutsy. I was so confident in taking the corporate strategy job. I just knew it was going to be great, and I knew I was going to be able to do it. And I remember we relocated, my husband and I both, we moved north, and I remember walking in first day on the job and having this, for the first time, moment realizing, I don't really know this boss. I don't even know how to name every single division at this company. And if I can't name them, I certainly can't tell you what they do. And I have a general sense of our competitors, but that's about it. I know technology, and I'm surrounded by people who were hired from Bain and McKinsey and BCG. And it was all in that moment. I'm like, oh my God, what did I do? I might have actually bitten off more than I can chew, but here I am. And it was the beginning of the most like formative next inflection point in my career. And it was 2 years, and I would never change it because who I am today was thanks to those 2 years and taking that risk. I won't say that it was perfect, and I won't say that it was easy.
Yeah, well, look, that's what I think is always fantastic to hear, right? Like many people, they listen to these narratives of how people, progress in their life and their career, and it's always a story of perfection. And entrepreneurs go for a jog, they trip over a stone and start Airbnb, and that's exactly how it happened. But I love that you're describing this moment, where the realization kicks in. And, people, I've certainly faced that in my career too as well. Moments where, I knew my gut was telling me this is something I should do, I should try. But there is that moment where you're like, well, what the heck? I actually don't know how to do this. Why did I make this choice? The anxiety kicks in. They're tough moments, right? It's something where, again, and many people struggle with that. And I'm sure they feel frustration when they're like, why didn't I take that opportunity? Or why didn't I put myself outside my comfort zone? But again, as you're describing, I think similar for me, one thing I remember in one of my first ever roles where, I started off as an engineer and I liked it, but I wasn't amazing at it. And maybe one day a week, I had a great day where I got in, wrote code and looked at the clock and it was 5 p.m. And I was like, how did that happen? But 4 other days, I was banging my head against a table going like, why am I doing this stuff? But the thing that was interesting for me as I got into actually a smaller team in a startup is I got to understand there were different parts of the team, if you will, and what they did. And I actually started to learn by just being in a team that actually what I enjoyed more was less coding and more spending time trying to design or talk to customers or come up with what the product might be, but I had no experience in that. And the only way I could learn that was there was an opportunity created where I was in a smaller team in a startup to see the different roles, and then just start to try to do it. And believe me, I sucked in the beginning. Don't get me wrong.
Nope.
Most of my team members will be quite happy to come on the podcast and remind me how much I sucked. But I had this passion for it. And that allowed me to be interested, to keep learning about it, to read things, to try and introduce ideas back into the team. Because I was learning these things and getting excited about them and then being able to share these ideas back with our group. And, that was one of the things I think that made us grow as a team more successfully, is that we sort of instituted this culture almost of every couple of weeks. If someone found a new tool or a new technique, they would bring it to the team and we'd try it. And sometimes it would work and sometimes we'd be like, right, that didn't work. So what's our next best idea? And that was a huge lesson for me in like learning to believe in myself, to try things, that I'll figure it out if I've got the time and support around me, which sounds very similar to, I imagine, how that process worked for you. The moment where you're there going, wow, why did I make this choice? But you sort of alluded a little bit to having support of great leaders around you, but a belief in yourself to learn. So, for you now, probably, especially as a senior leader, right, you've got a team of people who are probably in your organization facing these challenges. How do you help them understand or try or adopt some of this philosophy mentality that you had so many great experiences to learn? How do you try to nurture that in your teams?
Well, I'll piggyback off of something that you said, how important it is to find what you love to do. There's that saying, do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. My story actually, as it relates to software engineering, was very similar to you. I remember getting feedback. I shared a cube wall with an executive assistant, and at some point feedback came in. I banged on my desk, and the banging on my desk was bothering the executive assistant. And like any good software developer who's really passionate about what she does but maybe doesn't always have the best days, like I get very frustrated. And I think kind of over the course of my time as a developer, I had, like you said, those different opportunities to try this, to try that, like that software process advocate role I told you about was one of those. Like I just went into it because the opportunity came my way, and that was when I decided and realized what my passion was. I kind of stumbled into it, and then it's like, okay, let me find elements and jobs that have these elements, and thus a career was made. As I coach, whether they report to me or whether there are other people in the organization, I challenge them to think about, when does it not feel like work? What are the jobs that you would do whether you were paid or not? What are the things that you were doing when you stayed late and chose to and didn't mind, and in fact were excited or couldn't wait to get up the next day? And what was it about the specific thing that you were so excited about, and how do you recreate that? Because it's my experience that you can turn any job, just about, into something that you love doing just by being a little bit smart about how you craft your day. But you have to spend initially that time introspecting on, what do I love and what do I hate? And it was actually, I remember John, I was talking with him about it, and he used the example of cooking in a kitchen, and he's like, so I hate to chop onions. I am going to find somebody who is the best dang onion chopper, and they love to chop onions. He was talking about how you build a leadership team, right? And it's like, if they love to chop onions and you hate it, you have a match made in heaven. Find somebody who they love to chop onions, but they hate, cooking the bouillabaisse or whatever, but you love doing that. And all of a sudden, you have a leadership team that can cook a gourmet meal. But having that self-awareness and the willingness to, spend a little bit of time with yourself saying, what do I love? What do I hate? How do I build a team around me that allows me to do more of that thing that I love? And that maybe creates an opportunity for somebody who's really good and can really shine at something that I don't like doing or I'm not so good at.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the things, I was lucky. I was in a company at one stage in my life where there was a lot of encouragement for us to self-reflect, and both about maybe our mindset, our strengths, our weaknesses, things that we enjoyed, which was all in the guise of actually building great teams. Like, one of the things we used to always do when we started new projects is we would get together and we would share whatever, tool that we used. Maybe it was a Myers-Briggs, maybe it was a disc thing, all these different tools that help people get a glimpse into, how you prefer to work. But also then giving people lots of chance to put context around it. Like, as you say, I enjoy getting into the detail of things, actually probably too much. Sometimes you're going to have to pull me out of that. Or I'm someone who gets excited about the vision, and sometimes I actually can forget some of the details because I'm excited about where we're trying to get to in 3 years' time. And for me, that was actually one of the most fun times when you would ever start a project, because it was the beginning of people starting to share a little bit about themselves, what they're good at, what they're not good at, create a little bit of vulnerability, but also talk about opportunities that they would like to try and gain from the actual assignment that they were on, to make it interesting and fun for them, so they're constantly growing. Like, one of the things at the moment that is a big passion for me is, it's funny, I almost seem to be going back to my engineering days. I'm really fascinated by a lot of these new tools that are out there that I can sort of optimize and automate a lot of my workflow. So now I find myself, sort of trying to sneak back off to a no-code tools or something where I'm like, oh, if I seem to do this, I don't know, a weekly report, is there a way I could automate that? Or I'm on calls with people, can I transcribe it and send it to machines and they send it back in a format that I can send out again? I'm starting to experiment again in this space. So for someone like yourself, right, now you've great run at Vanguard, you've now taken on a new role over the last number of years at LPL Financial. So what are some of the things that you found about yourself as you were obviously CIO in one business and went into a new business? What were some of the new opportunities that emerged for you, or things you've noticed you've had to grow into or even let go of and unlearn from your time in the previous roles?
As we go into the new year, I'm actually hitting my 2-year anniversary in just a few weeks here. And so I've sort of had that, hey, suddenly it feels easier. Like, what have I learned that I didn't know coming in? And I like that this is called Unlearn, and that you're asking about what I had to unlearn, because I think it's suddenly gotten easier for me because a few things clicked. And I literally, at the end of the year, I was telling my boss, I'm usually a lot faster on the uptake than this. But it's like appreciating that after 17 years at one place, There is that expression about an old dog and new tricks, and I think I was like right at the like I was an old dog, and so it took her a while to learn the new tricks here. I think one of the most profound, and I'm going to say it, and you're going to know that's not very profound, but profound for me, ahas, was just how different two organizations can think about roles and how they define the roles. So at Vanguard, my job was very much, and roles are very much defined by what reports to you. And so the title doesn't mean much. In fact, it's relatively flat in terms of titles. And Vanguard has intentionally stayed away from titles. And so people define status and job by size of the organization, how many layers, what functions report. And coming to LPL, I had this big title, much bigger than I had had at Vanguard. And yet, like, the functions and the things that I was used to having report to me didn't report to me. And I spent too long, I won't say how long, but I spent too long allowing myself to be defined by the same definitions of what had defined me at Vanguard. And it wasn't until, kind of having a few moments of truth where it's like, hey, I don't understand this feedback. I don't understand this feedback in the context that I finally started to ask myself, what must be true about here that wasn't true over there that makes this feedback make sense, because otherwise it doesn't. When I had this like Saul of Tarsus moment where the scales fell out of my eyes, and it was, oh my God, here my job is defined by my title. And I am playing small, and I'm playing in my lane because I am allowing myself to be defined by a construct that like didn't follow me to the new company. And it was literally like I felt like I had a new lease on my job. I had a new understanding, a new sense of empowerment. But like, I think that was for me just an appreciation for how profound a culture change can be, and how it should have been obvious, but it wasn't. And you sort of had to live through it.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you sharing this. It's a fantastic example. But I think so many people experience these moments in their career, right? Especially, as you say, when you change from one business to another. Like, I've been on teams where the culture even within the teams can be so different. And behaviors that make you successful in one moment can be absolutely catastrophic in another, because there's a different expectations of behaviors. One of the things when I was doing a consulting role is that you would move a lot from one business to another, but you'd also move from one team to another. So some projects you'd be working with a set of people from our company who you'd love working with, and we'd have maybe a culture of people putting ideas out there and challenging them. And then you'd also be in a client's culture as well, where that might be welcomed, it might be receptive, it might be actually quite agitating for that group. So there was always these dynamics. And many times I still remember I would go from one project to another, especially if I had a positive experience, and be like, this is the way we need to do it. And, believe me, there were many times where the first couple of months or whatever it was actually painful, because I thought I was doing the best practice to get me to the outcome I thought I wanted and also the team wanted. But it was in the wrong context. I was sort of blinkered a bit for a little to say, oh, actually, no, this is a different set of things is going to work here. It's actually what inspired me to write Unlearn, to be honest, because I fell into that trap too of what had made me successful in one context, just thinking I could bring it to another and not adapt, which was actually, a big aha to write the book too as well, funnily enough, as you describe it, because so many people experience this, as you say. And so what were some of the things that helped you, like, I always think it's, as you say, these aha moments, right? Like, just listening to you now, you have this whole new set of clarity I can sense, because, you've got this insight and you're like, right, what are some of the things now that you're starting to do differently that you're like, okay, how am I starting to adapt and unlearn and relearn? What are some of the things that sort of jump into your mind?
Yeah, so first of all, like, the other macro observation that I would have is that we are at our core the same people. I told you, I warned you going into this, I quote John often. One of his John-isms that I have adopted and now use all the time is core of the onion. And like we each have our little core of the onion things, and there's usually just a small, like 4 or 5 things, but it's like if it's gonna trip us up, it's gonna be that thing, or if we trip up, it's gonna be that thing. And it infuriates me because I know what my core of the onion things are. And when I kind of look at a situation, I just tripped up and it's like, sure enough, it's this Kristie core of the onion thing. And sort of like you have these opportunities and cycles over life to see at the end of the day, like people don't change that much. For me, and I also think like life has patterns to it too, moving to LPL was in a lot of ways the same decision and the same thing as it was for me leaving IT and going to corporate strategy. Like it was a radical change of context. It was this gut feeling that said, I need to go do something different. I need to go experience different things. And so what I have tried to do, and I was at least more successful coming into LPL than I was successful going into corporate strategy, because I channeled some of those lessons and some of those context switches that I had learned and skin knees that came back then. But I still won't say it was perfect, because one of my core of the onion things is that I'm an introvert. So I'm an introvert. I was kind of raised in a very serious environment, and I tended to be a loner. I forget to ask for help. I'm very self-sufficient. And of course that didn't play well, like going into corporate strategy where I didn't learn anything or didn't know anything about the context. Doesn't play well coming into a new company either. But like one of the things that, I would say, first of all, self-awareness, like knowing that I'm going into a context where I'm going to be triggered. So when have I been in similar contexts? What have I done? How do I not do those things? And then kind of leading with curiosity and low ego, which I think, if I have to say where are things that I have changed over the course of my career, having just a lot more inherent confidence that I don't know what I'm doing a lot of times, but I can figure it out, allows you to let your guard down and be curious. So rather than jumping to I know the right answer and I'm going to be judgmental, it's the Ted Lasso, be curious, not judgmental. What I now coach folks as they come in, and are all of them adopting to a different context here at LPL, is that like we were all hired to make change. But if we come in just focused on making change, we're going to suffer organ rejection.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of that 50-50 balance between being an archaeologist or an anthropologist and 50% change leader, and that you have to get that balance right and really trying to understand why things are the way they are and why does the organization operate as it does and who are the people that are in it and how does the ecosystem work, while not losing sight of the fact that we were also here to kind of help evolve the company, has been like a really key heuristic that I have used and that I coach others on now.
I think it's just a great lesson for anybody, whether they're taking on a new role, they're moving companies, or they're just trying to improve. It's really important to understand how, as you say, the system works, but you also got to change the system. Like that's why most people are brought to new positions, why they're asked to take new roles, is a system, if it doesn't constantly evolve, it goes into disrepair, it goes, it falls behind where the market might be moving, whatever analogy you want to use. It's fascinating to hear you sort of share all that. Well, looking forward then for you, right? You've obviously had this, again, great journey, always putting yourself out there, very self-aware. You've obviously worked very hard to be aware of yourself so you can help, grow, but also help your team grow, which is fantastic. What are some of the things you're most excited about ahead in the industry that you think maybe more people need to unlearn, or maybe the industry might even need to unlearn?
I shared like my core of the onion thing, tending to try to be self-sufficient and go it alone. I actually think that that's like it's a very human thing. None of us like to ask for help. And you know what? Like in general, organizations don't like to ask for help. This, as I was preparing and thinking a bit about this podcast, And that question that you were going to ask around organizations unlearning, something came to me yesterday. It was a course of conversation that we were having, where it's like a parallel between, both at Vanguard and at LPL now. And I'm like, I have a feeling this is probably a truth of how IT organizations exist inside companies and the journey, the digital transformation that so many companies are on. A lot of times we, as an individual human or as an individual leader or an individual function, depending on the context, we see an answer clearer or more quickly because we're closer to the problem than our business partners. And I would say, and I think John, I may have talked about this, with you, Barry, on when he was with you, but I definitely heard him talk about it in public in Vanguard's context, where technology started the journey and found itself getting out ahead of the business. And yesterday we were having a conversation as a leadership team, and we were self-reflecting on something similar here at LPL, where we in technology may have started a journey and forgetting to bring the people along with us who need to be a part of the journey. Like one of those key nuggets that I learned when I was in corporate strategy, and it was ironically a business sponsor that I really didn't get along with. I think felt like he had a thing or two to teach me, and you know what, I think he was right. But sometimes where there's personality friction, the lessons really last. And in this case, I remember him saying, Kristie, it doesn't matter if you have the right answer. The only way that you make this successful is if you make it everybody else's answer and everybody forgets that it was the answer came from you. Like that is how you do change management. That is how you influence and persuade. And that is how you get a strategy to get legs underneath of it. That's how you were successful. When everybody else thinks it was their idea, it's this kind of low ego thing that you have to get comfortable with, right? But is so true. And if I think back on my transformation experiences that I have led, where I have messed up or where I have been successful, it's been this very low ego. How do we make it everybody else's idea? How do we bring people along at the start of the journey, even if we think we know better? Even if we think we have the answer, it's never as good an answer as when everybody comes along with it. And so I would say that as it relates to the technology industry and business and transformation, as much as digital transformation has been a thing now for, a decade plus, with AI and how quickly the AI transformation that is accelerating, it's only going to become more and more true. And I would say unlearning that tendency that we as a technical experts have the ideas on what it takes to do transformation, and really kind of having that belief that, hey, we need to get everybody on board with the idea that transformation is necessary, but often we shouldn't be the ones who are leading it. Usually, almost always, it needs to start with the business strategy and kind of allowing the idea to be out there that we need to make this change, but being led in collaboration with our business partners and making it easy for our business partners to take that lead and for them to create and feel like the idea was theirs, I think is a hugely important thing for the success of corporate transformation, so that it's not just a technology thing doing the thing that we do, which is talking big words and, are often misunderstood.
Yeah, no, I love this example, and you're right. John mentioned that when we did the podcast with him on Vanguard, but we also had Stephen Lice on the show, who's the head of customer technology for American Airlines. So in charge of all of their customer facing technology. And he shared exactly the same pattern that you're describing. When they tried to transform, if you will, American Airlines, they started in technology and just went out and transformed on their own. But it didn't work, right? It was a catastrophic sort of problem for them, because they were off transforming in their little part of the company, and everyone else was going, where's my stuff? What do you mean? Where's my delivery? And the show is great. I recommend people listen to it. But again, he described also this pattern of finding a business partner within the company to transform with them. And that's actually when they started to make progress. At finding collaborators who were willing to say, let's go on this journey together. Let's figure out new ways of working together. And as you say, roll forward 18 months later, everybody's transforming and nobody is really talking about, well, is this group or this thing that ignited it. It's the whole company just has a new philosophy of saying, yeah, we want to change the way we work, and that's how we work now, you know. And yeah, I do think it's a truism of this industry where nobody can do it alone. No department can do it on their own. It really is, as you said before, a system that has to be willing to grow together. And I think it's why one of these ideas of partnership, collaboration, as you say, people within your company that are going to be co-collaborators to make it happen is a huge part of that journey. So yeah, great examples as ever.
I learned something about human psychology not long ago that made it all make sense. So none of us as individuals like to ask for help. Psychology shows, and it's completely opposite from what you would think. You would think that you as a human ask for help and you ask for a favor and the person does you the favor and then you owe them. According to psychology, once the person does the favor for you, they are invested. Then they want to see you succeed. And so in asking for help, you are actually doing yourself a favor because that person invested time, which means they are invested in the success and feel like they were a part of it. And it's this magical thing when you start to think about how to do that at scale. That's how you transform at scale, where you invite people in, you sort of demonstrate that vulnerability, they give help, they're invested, and all of a sudden everything gets easier because you're all on the same page and fighting for the same team.
I think it's such a great reminder. I've fallen into the trap of not asking for help, or I've seen myself or others feel like the way to get through it is not to tell people that we're struggling. It's to figure it out myself, and then we'll get the breakthrough, and then I'll tell them all about it. I see this a lot in the startups I work with too as well, especially even with their investors. This fear to say, we're struggling. This thing hasn't turned out as we planned. I need some help, ideas about how we could solve this. And I tell you what, every single time, whether it's the founder, the team leader, the person has this breakthrough of being able to ask for help and engaging, whether it's their investors, whether it's their business partners, whether it's people in their whatever community, the magic happens. Because people have, as you say, they've invested in them. They're helping them solve the problem. They want to see them succeed. They activate their network. They bring their skills, their competencies to the mission that the person they're helping is on. And I just think it's a great example of what many people need to unlearn, is that asking for help is actually one of the most powerful techniques probably out there. And it's not a sign of weakness. It's actually a sign of strength. And the more people I think that can do that, I think we're going to have much better outcomes in many of the missions that we're on.
We all want to be part of something bigger than ourselves, and asking for help gives the people around us an opportunity to be part of our story. It's this amazing thing that I've now seen play out over and over, like the magic that happens when you let people in, but you have to live it, whether as an individual or as a whole organization, to believe in the power. So I would say unlearn I have to go it on my own. I have to grit through it and learn that the power is actually in asking for help.
It's been absolutely phenomenal to have you on the show. Thank you for sharing your story so openly and humbly. This is what people I know love listening to. And yeah, it's been great to have you on the show. And thank you very much for sharing.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. It was great to meet you.
Thanks so much for listening. If you found this episode useful, make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Please consider leaving a rating or review, as it helps others find our podcast. For more episode and details about the show, visit barryoreilly.com, and we'll see you on the next episode.